All right, so today we're going to talk about graphing quadratics. So we've already graphed using a table, and what we've been doing is we've been using -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. But I'm going to show you what happens when those numbers don't always give you what you need to graph a quadratic. So let's plug those into this equation. If I plug in a -2, I get y equals -2 squared minus 4 times -2 plus 3. So that's 4 plus 8 plus 3. That comes out to 15. So already I'm like way off my graph somewhere up here. If I plug in a -1, oops, minus 4. I get 1 plus 4 plus 3, so that comes out to 8. If I plug in 0, I'm going to get a 3. If I plug in 1, I get 1 minus 4 plus 3, so that one's going to be 0. And if I plug in 2, I get 4 minus 8 plus 3, so that comes out to -1. All right, so 0, 3, 0. All right, so what is a parabola supposed to look like? Like a U. Do I have a U at this point? No. So I would actually have to keep plugging in points until I get a U. I have to plug in a 3, and trust me, I end up getting a 0. And if I plug in a 4, I end up getting a 3. So then, finally, it's looking like a parabola, right? Well, sometimes I may have one that's way over the axis of symmetry is something like x equals 7 or 8. So you would be putting these numbers in for a very long time before you got a U, wouldn't you? Like if you're starting at -2 and you had to go all the way till 8 before it started coming around the other side, that takes a while, right? So what we can do is we can figure out where the axis of symmetry is, and that will shorten it for us. So instead of just picking -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2, we know where we should have our table. So, so here's an example. We're going to graph y equals x squared minus 4x plus 3 using the axis of symmetry. So step 1, we're going to find the axis of symmetry. Step 2, we're going to find the vertex. And then we find 2 more points on one side of the vertex, and we use the fact that it's a mirror image, that it's symmetrical, to graph it. All right, so let's start with the axis of symmetry. So I know that in here A is equal to 1 and B is equal to -4, so my axis of symmetry x equals -b over 2a. So negative of -4 over 2 times 1 comes out to 4 over 2, and so x is equal to 2 is my axis of symmetry. So I can go ahead and draw that down here on my graph. It's a vertical line, x equals 2. And that's my axis of symmetry. All right, then I'm going to find the vertex. How did we find the vertex yesterday? What did I do with that x? I plug it in. So my equation is y equals x squared minus 4x plus 3. So y equals 2 squared minus 4 times 2 plus 3. So 4 minus 8 plus 3. And I end up getting that y equals -1. So my vertex is going to be at 2, -1. Down here. So there's my vertex at 2, -1. All right, so now I'm going to find 2 more points. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to still have a table, but it's just going to be a whole lot smaller. I already found 2, -1, and then I'm going to go 2 more points just on one side. So I could go to the left and do 0, 1, and 0, Or I could go to the right and do 3 and 4. So which numbers are going to be easier, 1 and 0 or 3 and 4? Isn't 0 always easier? Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and go that direction. So I plug in the 1, and I get 1 squared minus 4 times 1 plus 3. And so that's 1 minus 4 plus 3. That comes out to 0. If I plug in the 0, I get 3. So I'm going to go ahead and plot those points. So 1, 0, and 0, 3. So I have half of my parabola on this side, don't I? Well, what I can do is then I can use my axis like a mirror and come up with the points from the other side. It's one space over to the axis, so I just go one more space and find another point here. And then if I go to this point up here, 0, 3, I have to go 2 spaces to get to the axis, so I just go 2 more, and I have another point. And there's the other half of my parabola. So you just use the mirror image to graph it. And that way you don't have to plug as many points or make as large as a table. And it also makes sure your table is in the right place. Okay? Any questions about what I did? No. All right, so let's do another one where I kind of go through it a little bit more smoothly so you're not like broken up like this. So, all right. So, oh, wrong direction. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to graph y equals negative x squared plus 6x minus 3. So first of all, which direction do you think this one should be going? Down. Should be going down. So when you're doing your homework, pay attention to whether it should be going up or down, because that'll make a difference. All right, so first I'm going to find my axis. So I've got x equals negative b over 2 times negative 1. And so that's negative 6 over negative 2, so I get x equals 3. All right, it's really important that you graph that line, because if you don't, you might use something else as your mirror, okay? Make sure you graph the axis. All right, so now I know where to start my table. I started at 3. I can count up or count down. What's going to be easier? Down. Counting down, smaller numbers, right? All right, so I'm going to plug in the 3, the 2, and the 1. So if I plug in 3, I get negative 9 plus 18 minus 3. So 18 minus 9 is 9. 9 minus 3, I get 6. And that's my vertex at 3, 6. All right, then I plug in the 2. So I get negative 4 plus 12 minus 3. And so I get 5. So 2, 5 is my next point. Then I plug in the 1. Oops. And so I get negative 1 plus 6 minus 3, so I end up with 2. So I've got half my graph. Now I just use my axis as my mirror. And I go and find the other 2 points on the other side, and then I draw the graph. Okay, any questions? All right, so let me show you a common mistake that happens if you don't graph the axis. Let's see here, let's copy that. Oops, no, undo that. Copy. Okay. So suppose I had plotted those points without plotting the axis. So we had 1, 2, and there. Suppose I had just those points plotted. What I see happening is people use the y-axis as a mirror and do this. and they end up with this really weird looking graph. Now, does that make sense? Does that look like a parabola? No. Plus, we were expecting it to go down, weren't we? But I cannot tell you how many times I have seen that. So that's why it's really, really important that you graph your axis of symmetry so you know where your mirror is, okay? Then it'll look right. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, let's do one more together. All right, so I've got 3x squared minus 3x plus 1. So why don't you guys figure out what the axis of symmetry is first, real quick. All right, so we came up with x equals 1/2. All right, so it's a little bit of a pain in the neck because it's a fraction, but it's still going to work, okay? So I don't want you guys to freak out just because it's a fraction. So x equals 1/2 is going to be right there, isn't it? So you still want to graph it so you can see where your mirror is or where your axis of symmetry is. All right, so when I make my table, it means my vertex is going to be at 1/2. But do I have to keep putting fractions in after that? No. I can, from there, I can either count up or down. If I go up, what is the next whole number above 1/2? 1. So I can put in a 1, and I can put in a 2. All right, and then if you really want to, you can put in one more, but really just those two is going to be enough to graph it. Okay, so if I put in the 1/2, I get y equals 3 times 1/2 squared minus 3 times 1/2 plus 1. So that's 3 times 1/4 minus 3/2 plus 1. And so that's going to give me 3/4 on minus 3/2 plus 1. So you have to get a common denominator. What's my common denominator going to be? 4. So I'm going to multiply this one times 2 over 2, and I'm going to multiply this one times 4 over 4 so that everything is over 4. And so I get 3/4 minus 6/4 plus 4/4. And so 3 minus 6 is negative 3 plus 4. I end up with 1/4. You guys agree with me? Okay. So that's the only one that's going to be a little bit of a pain in the neck, but once you've done it, you've got it. And then you're just going to do the best approximation to graph it. 1/2, 1/4 is going to be just above the line, about there. I don't expect it to be perfect, but it can at least be close, right? All right, if we plug in a 1, then I've got y equals 3 times 1 squared minus 3 times 1 plus 1. So 3 minus 3 plus 1, that comes out to 1. So my point is 1, 1 right here, and then my mirror image is going to be half of a unit on the other side. Okay, and then if I plug in a 2, I'm going to end up getting 7. So 2, 7, and then you find the mirror image on the other side. So it'll still work even if the fraction is 1/2. If you end up with a fraction that's different than 1/2, that's not right in the middle, like say it's 1/3 or 5/3, then you are going to have to make a full table on either side to be able to find the points. But you shouldn't run into those problems too often, okay? All right. Thank you.